in a negative way. It's very nice to see you. It's a great pleasure. It's a prospect. Yeah, yeah. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just arriving, you've come to the right place. This will soon be the high-level public-private dialogue on building support for the energy transition. We're getting off to a bit of a late start. I appreciate your patience. We will begin shortly. Yeah. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this high-level public-private dialogue on building support for the energy transition. This dialogue is hosted by the Coalition for Action, which is the most established and most diverse of all of IRENA's networks of non-government stakeholders. I'm Melinda Crane. I'm an international journalist with a good deal of experience in the renewable energy sector, and it is a great honor to work today with you as moderator. IRENA's public-private dialogue platform regularly brings together leading private sector and government and civil society representatives to discuss the most pressing issues for accelerating uptake of renewable energy. And often, as you know, these revolve around top-down policies. But as many of you are well aware from experience, a growing bottom-up movement is also driving the energy transition, and that is our focus today. How do we boost public acceptance and public enthusiasm for the transformation of our energy systems? What approaches can turn NIMBY, not in my backyard, rejection into community-based participation? How much impact can grassroots initiatives deliver, and what works in practice? That's our topic. Those are our guiding questions. And here in the room, there is an absolute wealth of expertise on all of those questions, from organizations, from policymakers, from firms, and civil society working tirelessly to build public support for renewable energy. We will begin with greetings and a scene-setting presentation from our host, Irina, and then I will open the floor to comments from you, Excellencies and distinguished guests. And now it is my great pleasure to hand over the floor to IRENA's Deputy Director General, Gauri Singh, who will get us started with words of greeting.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and welcome to our pre-day discussions just before our 15th assembly starts tomorrow. And I think, we've seen some really very good discussions that have happened today, and I'm sure that the discussion that we'll have in this session will provide us the insights that we need to shape and to work on our own work program and deliver the kind of outcomes that we hope we can do together. So it's really my pleasure to welcome you all to this eighth high-level public-private dialogue. And today we focus on a topic that applies to all of us, which is community support for the energy transition. And we all know that people's participation and collective action are going to play a very critical role in the energy transition. And more importantly, we also understand that public support will come for energy transition only if we are able to have clear communication, build trust, and ensure that the citizens feel that their needs and concerns are being met as we move along. So, a year ago, we had dedicated our discussion to building momentum towards a 100% renewable energy system. And again, we all know that energy transition is just not about technology, it's about people. And beyond reducing emissions, renewable impact livelihoods, it impacts energy security, affordability, and public health. So, the principles of fairness, transparency, accountability, and inclusion are just as relevant for energy transition as they are for civil rights. Fair, inclusive policy making rooted in dialogue, equitable sharing of benefits, builds trust and legitimacy, and it's vital to engage with the marginalized groups, whether they're women, indigenous communities, or with the youth to ensure that they all have a voice in this very important transition of this century. So IRENA, as you also know, has brought and highlighted the social dimension of the transition by examining jobs, the impact on gender, and the local value creation. And last November, we published the community energy benefits powering of universal well-being, which highlights the advantages of pursuing energy transition, keeping community at the center while moving forward to achieve the tripling of renewable energy capacity by 2030 in a just and inclusive manner. Our Coalition for Action working group identified community energy as a key to public acceptance. And by involving communities in ownership and partnerships, renewable projects can drive jobs, economic resilience, improve gender equality, and create local value. We also know that there are some good practices in this field with inclusive models like energy cooperatives and public-private partnerships that not only advance climate goals but also empower communities and strengthen local economies. Education and awareness are equally crucial, and citizens need to be informed by science, about the very ambitious energy policies. And together, I think we can and we can scale up initiatives that showcase the benefits of renewables and the negative societal cost of inaction. In closing, I'd just like to remind you all here today that energy transition, above anything else, is about improving lives, livelihoods, and communities. And through this collaboration together, we can build an energy system that not just combats climate change, but also delivers prosperity, resilience, and opportunity for all. So I look forward to your insights on how governments, businesses, cooperatives, marginalized groups, and communities can collaborate for a fair and inclusive energy future. Thank you to all the partners of the IRENA Coalition for Action and to all of you for being here today and being part of this discussion and enriching us with your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director General. And you underlined IRENA's long history of commitment to building public support. In fact, the Coalition for Action was established already 11 years ago by IRENA and 35 leading renewable energy stakeholders, and their number has now grown to 170, so showing the tremendous expansion of interest in this very, very crucial issue. And IRENA has long recognized the crucial socioeconomic aspect of the energy transition, including through the collection and publication of very extensive data on the positive benefits that renewable energy is already delivering on the ground, including jobs, including gains for women, rural communities, and others. So now we want to take a closer look at some of that data. Our next speaker will share findings from the latest work by IRENA and the Coalition for Action. It's my pleasure to hand over to Raul Alfaro Pelico. He is director of IRENA's Knowledge, Policy, and Finance Center, and he will present some of the latest findings.
Thank you, Melinda. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. As you've heard, is the 8th public-private dialogue, and the focus is on community support for the energy transition, organized by the IRENA Coalition for Action. You've heard already quite a bit about the IRENA Coalition for Action. Thank you, Melinda, for sharing those, the experience of the Coalition for Action. So I'm going to move very quickly onto the report findings. So I think, part of the benefits of bringing this discussion in the context of the coalition is its diverse and inclusive membership. And, the best practices and lessons learned that come out of this report are a clear representation of the need to bring state and non-state actors together. Um, this comes out of the key platform of exchanging experiences on the ground, and really it's gathering collective knowledge and identifying key actions to accelerate the global energy transition. So the focus on public acceptance, we keep hearing about this. So a little bit conceptually, we refer to the level of approval or support that communities show toward renewable energy policies, technologies, and infrastructure developments. As it was emphasized by the Deputy Director General, ignoring the importance of public acceptance can really result in the lack of buy-in, opposition to measures, and insufficient adoption of sustainability practices. The latest IRENA World Energy Transition Outlook emphasizes that public support for climate initiatives is strengthened with a holistic approach to the transition, one that addresses both climate and social goals. The importance of inclusive, participatory approaches and equitable benefit sharing has also been stressed, and discussions on national and international priorities by the IRENA's collaborative framework on just and inclusive energy transition, which also brings together IRENA's global membership along with the wider energy community. So communities are likely to be supportive even when they perceive that the outcomes are just. Two elements are particularly important here. There is the procedural justice, which refers to the process. Communities accept projects when they consider that the processes are fair, with decisions taken in a transparent and inclusive way. Another element is distributional justice. If stakeholders perceive that the resources, opportunities, risks, and costs and benefits are equitably shared, they are likely to accept the outcome. So these elements are context specific and rely on trust. Trust can be built by effective communication and regular updates. It is important to identify and include the stakeholders early enough in the process so that we can allow them to offer the feedback. So, what tools exist that can put the elements of justice into practice and secure public support? Firstly, we need transparent and meaningful decision-making processes that go beyond the mere provision of information. So here, the principle of free, prior, and informed consent should be applied to the indigenous peoples and local communities. Where a renewable energy project is sited or located and how land is used for a project is owned and accessed should really involve consultation and negotiation. So really empowering decision-making by individuals and communities is essential. This requires capacity building and education so that communities and individuals can understand and benefit from the energy transition opportunities. This includes awareness raising and education, combating misinformation, and promoting sustainable behaviors. I would like to stress the importance of integrating local knowledge to ensure alignment with local context and values. In addition, renewable energy and infrastructure developments should contribute to and benefit host communities. Benefit sharing mechanisms can ensure that social license to operate. Examples include community trusts and benefit funds that are invested in issues that matter locally. Another aspect is providing training and job opportunities for local communities and generating local value. Community ownership is another powerful tool because when people have a stake in a project, they are more likely to support and promote it to others. As such, since 2018, the Coalition for Action members have been promoting community energy as one of the tools to achieve broad local support. So the working group that was referred to earlier, published 4 white papers outlining policy recommendations, investment options, and best practice. At COP, we launched our latest paper on community energy benefits, which builds a strong case for citizen ownership and participation in renewable energy projects. Some of the learnings of this report were also disseminated at the COP for combating desertification that took place in Saudi Arabia, where our Director General participated. Community energy ensures that local acceptance by fostering social cohesion, empowering women, and supporting local development. It really delivers economic benefits, especially through decentralized renewable energy solutions for underserved communities. In addition, community energy supports our balanced relationship with nature. Local community-led projects are more likely to prioritize sustainable practices, preserving local ecosystems, and enhancing our capacity to adapt to climate change. This all stresses the importance to empower local communities, including indigenous peoples, marginalized groups, and vulnerable populations, to understand and benefit from the implications of the energy transition in resource use, ownership structures, and distribution of benefits. I'd like to finish my presentation by providing some recommendations on how we can strengthen public support that will enable us to accelerate the energy transition and ensure that its benefits are shared equitably. Firstly, we need enabling policy frameworks, which should facilitate ownership and fair access to clean technologies. Inclusive approach here is needed, prioritizing the needs of marginalized groups, incorporating gender lens and distributional considerations, and remediating regressive policy effects. Specific incentives and financing mechanisms should target low-income households. Governments should commit to policies and programs that enable historically disadvantaged regions and communities to benefit from the energy transition opportunities, such as assisting communities that rely on fossil fuels and providing energy access to regions that are not connected. Then we also need greater efforts in inclusive decision-making and participatory planning. Communities can actively participate through consultation, dialogues, participatory budgeting, and ownership of local projects. These processes must be underpinned by accountability, clear communication, transparency, and access to justice. It is important to incorporate local knowledge in that process, nature as well as biodiversity considerations. Finally, we need to strengthen international collaboration and facilitate knowledge exchange, peer learning, and global local collaboration among stakeholders, with local governments playing a key role in the on-ground action as well as in citizen engagement. International collaboration is also instrumental in facilitating cross-border cooperation and mobilizing financial support for the community-driven energy transition. In this regard, IRENA's collaborative framework on just and inclusive energy transition provides another platform to support these exchanges as well as collective action. We hope that this event contributes to this effort, and I'm looking forward to learning from your experiences of successful community engagement. The energy system, economy, and society are interconnected. The energy transition provides an opportunity to tackle systematic and systemic risks of inequality and climate change. And this is where people need to be at the heart of this transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Director Pellico. You've given us an excellent foundation for our exchange. We will be picking up on all of the different examples, looking at on-the-ground initiatives that are doing many of the things that you talked about. But I also think you've given us an excellent matrix for thinking about this with your idea of procedural justice, and distributional justice. Sounds so simple, not always easy to achieve, but it's a good way to try to see a matrix for what we're going to be talking about today. And as Director Pellico mentioned, including a wide variety of perspectives in debate and decision making is the most effective way to ensure that the energy transition is perceived as fair and broadly beneficial. And that's why we are especially pleased to have with us today a very wide range of voices and representatives from governments and the private sector, from civil society and youth. And I'm going to begin by calling on those who have pre-registered their wish to speak. And we will go from acknowledging conflicts to identifying solutions, such as empowering communities through ownership and decision-making, ensuring communities benefit fairly, and scaling up public awareness and engagement, and combating misinformation, all of which, of course, were just mentioned by the director. And we'll wrap up with some success stories and some lessons from the ground. And I will begin with our countries, and then I will widen the discussion to include organizations, civil society, and others. And following the pre-registered comments, if we have time, I will open the floor for other non-pre-registered contributions on some guiding questions that I will share at that point in time. If you hear something noteworthy and you'd like to let the world know, then please post on social media using the hashtag IRENA15A and tagging IRENA, of course. And let me ask everyone speaking today, please, to keep your remarks brief. And when I say brief, I mean 3 minutes maximum, because we do have quite a number of speakers. We started late, and I do want to try to open the floor towards the end for other comments as well. Finally, do share examples from your own experience. That is really what can enrich all of us, sharing those best practices. So the first step in this journey is, in fact, acknowledging and addressing potential conflicts over a particular renewable energy plan, and the sense that it perhaps isn't being structured fairly, distributionally, and otherwise. So how do we resolve challenges like that constructively? We can start by learning from Barbados, which is using community engagement to help win support also for projects that don't initially awaken enthusiasm. So over to you, Barbados. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, of course, start by acknowledging IRENA for hosting the session. This is I think my third IRENA Assembly as Minister of Energy for Barbados, and it continues to grow exponentially. So we're very pleased to be here. And I say so on behalf of my entire delegation, on behalf of the country. So PPFC and their director in their presentation just now spoke about the balance, and you mentioned it, about procedural justice. We have a particular project, a wind farm. Barbados is a country that has one of the highest penetrations of solar PV in the world. So our communities are very familiar with solar PV panels on their roofs and on ground-mounted systems. It's not unusual to see that. But wind is something new and it's unusual. And there's been a negative experience that was around 15 years old. And now we're moving forward with a new initiative, the first major onshore wind farm in Barbados. We do have 2 small wind farms, but because we have a population density that is quite intense, the question of whether or not the community would embrace the project was a huge one for the country. And because there was a negative experience over 15 years ago where a wind turbine fell, damaged property, people were anxious, and understandably so. So 15 years later now, and we will launch this project at the end of this month, actually, between 30 to 50 megawatts of wind energy for Barbados, the first one, major one, but it's in a community, and it's in partnership with the International Financial Corporation of the World Bank, as well as the utility and a number of private sector investors. And in order to be able to get the community on board, what we did was to take members of the community, first of all, to hire a community liaison representative who was on staff and there on a day-to-day basis taking responsibility for interfacing with members of the community. Secondly, we took members of the community along with the utility, along with the regulators, along with government officials, and along with the private sector off to Jamaica, another jurisdiction where there is a well-established modern wind farm, and they were able to see it in operation there. And their exposure to another country, another international best practice example, and being able to be immersed in that community then allowed them to bring those learnings back home and to share that knowledge and that experience. And then finally, what we've also built in is not just procedural inclusion and community inclusion, but financial inclusion by building, and we're continuing to build that, a special purpose vehicle that brings the investors, the utility, and the community together in a unit trust model that allows them to have shares in the new project. So there is a revenue generation benefit for them as well. So that is a model that we're happy to share here today. We're continuing to operationalize that, and we're looking forward to being able to learn from other countries as well. But aside from that one last point that I'd like to make as well is that we have a model in Barbados where we have a homeowner's right to renewable energy. So individual members of their community, they already have renewable energy projects on their own homes and on their own roofs. We in 2025 are now moving to focus on low income, vulnerable communities that are experiencing energy poverty, not because they don't have access to electricity, but because of costs. And we're now looking to elevate that project into a community solar project. And that is also meant to focus on enfranchisement, empowerment, and inclusion. And so those are the principles that we think are important to be able to facilitate bringing communities and countries and societies along in an economic and an investment model that gets us to our targets of energy transitioning.
Thank you very much. A lot to learn there. And I like the idea of a field trip to visit a successful best practice, especially if it's located in a place like Jamaica or Barbados. So many thanks to you for that. And as we can see there, building community support is a crucial step in bringing the energy transition forward, and community ownership can be a powerful tool to achieve that. I'd like to go to Belgium now and ask His Excellency Van der Straeten to share Belgium's strategy for championing community energy. Excellency, sorry.
Thank you, moderator, and also thank you, Irina, to organize and take the time in this pre-assembly day to have a public-private dialogue on community support. So on with regard to our citizens, with regard to our households, with regard to people. It's also good that we are in Abu Dhabi today, only 2 years after the COP28 and UAE consensus to triple renewable energy capacity by 2030. And in order to do so, to be able to triple our renewable energy capacity, we need to design our projects in a fair and in a just manner. What people need is access to affordable energy. What people need, what our citizens need, whether they live in Barbados, in Africa, in Belgium, across the world, is energy that does not harm their environment and that does not harm their health. And renewable energy gives us a very powerful tool to combine these things. And renewable energy gives us the opportunity to not make the same mistakes twice and not to use fossil fuels anymore. And renewable energy gives us the utmost and quintessential opportunity that we can include our citizens more. And indeed, in Belgium, we are a very small country in Europe. We have 67 kilometers of coastline. Yet we are today the second country worldwide with regard to offshore wind capacity in terms of capita. We are tripling, in the coming years, we are tripling our offshore wind capacity. And by doing so, we have defined a very important policy objective. And this also relates to something that Antonella from Renewable Grid Initiative always says: you build next to someone and into nature. So we also decided that when we build offshore wind and the infrastructure to go with it, that it cannot harm the sea and it needs to be beneficial to people. So what did we decide to do with regard to our citizens? Two things. First, as was mentioned by you, Madam Moderator, indeed, we made it possible for people to co-own offshore wind turbines. And this was a clear policy objective because our industry was not so keen to do so. They were pointing to the major capex investment of those projects, the risks associated. But very interesting to notice that this was not fought by the industry. They were just telling us difficult, complex, but it was not negatively lobbied with regard to our policy. And what did the industries do? They went to talk to energy communities that are already active in Belgium and to align with them how they could make this work. Owning a part of a wind turbine is one thing, but it's not accessible for everyone because it means that you need to put money on the table. But if you cannot pay your monthly energy bill, 20% of the Belgians cannot pay or have difficult to pay their energy invoice every day, they will not be able to give upfront money to be a co-owner of an offshore wind turbine. So the second objective to us was that the electricity produced by the offshore wind turbines also needs to be accessible to citizens. And everyone knows the idea of a PPA. And PPA is very typically something that is a contract between the offshore wind developer and then a large industry. And they buy and sell their electricity between both of them. We drafted our regulatory framework and our support mechanism in such a way that we also worked with the concept of a citizen PPA. So that also citizens, through the intermediary of an energy community, could have the same possibilities as a steelmaking factory or a large concrete industry could also buy this electricity, and also to have, in fact, a very practical decoupling from the gas prices. And so I'm very happy, Minister, today that we don't only have now wind developers planning to prepare their bids in the upcoming auction, that we also see a lot of movement from the citizen part of view. And I would like to underline this. This was a policy objective. It was defined as a policy objective and put forward as a policy objective. And then it was made into a reality by the different industries. And I would like to conclude on an anecdote that I once heard from my good colleagues from Barbados. There is a saying in Barbados that if you kill a cow, or if there is a cow meat to be shared, if everyone has a different part, then everyone walks away full. And that is exactly also the case with renewable energy projects. If we define those projects, we should make sure that everyone has a piece of the cake and that everyone can benefit from affordable energy.
Thank you very much for sharing that success story. Let us go now to the legislators, and we will begin with Canada, which collaborates with IRENA in its work with remote and Indigenous communities. I invite the Honorable Rosa Galvez to tell us more.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to say about Canada that the issue with jurisdiction. So provinces, we are 10 provinces, 2 territories, and provinces are in charge of their electricity and their natural resources. And in the federal, it just supports the initiative of the provinces. But with respect to indigenous people, they are called nations. They are, each one of them are individual, not independent, but individual nations with their own characteristics. So there is also this difference in Canada that while you have provinces that are very, very well advanced with renewable energy, like take, for example, British Columbia or Quebec or Nova Scotia, where hydro is more than 50%, or in Quebec, 95% hydro. You have other provinces in which they are still very much even thinking to returning to coal, and they have petroleum. And so it's very, very heterogeneous. So in general, renewable energy in Canada is hydro first, then biogas, which is a lot of as we are using, then geothermal, then solar, and then on-land wind. We don't have offshore, despite of the fact that we have plenty of great potential. We don't have that. We don't have also tidal. We don't have also wave energy. So, giving that introduction, I can tell you that the initiative comes from the cities, from the municipalities. And there is an economic support from the province and then an economic support from the federal. And in this sense, we are progressing. So the good news is that despite of the fact that probably the next government in Canada will be a climate change denial group, despite of the fact that we will have Trump as a neighbor. I don't think the transition to renewable energy can be stopped because renewable energy has proven to be cleaner, safer, cheaper, and also independent of geopolitical issues. So in that sense, for example, with the indigenous people, they are very much into wind and geothermal and biogas. And I think that this will continue to grow as we continue. And recently, we passed a federal bill in Canada to help Nova Scotia in their first offshore wind farm. Hopefully, hopefully that will see construction in the next some years. There is a last source of energy, which is the nuclear energy, especially in compact nuclear reactors. But this has been in the making for the last 30 years, and I think it has some issues. It takes very long to have permits, and the technology is not yet at the scale of even a pilot. And the same thing, and just as a parenthesis, I want to say that some oil and gas will be increased in production in Canada due to the fact that the government is giving subsidies to carbon capture and storage. And this is considered as a transition in the taxonomy. So, well, we'll see how it evolves, but I think that the fact that municipalities and provinces have full jurisdiction on natural resources and in electricity will still define how Canada moves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go now to the Philippines and hear how the Philippines is addressing community energy. I invite the Undersecretary Rowana Guevara to provide her input.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to present our perspective on public-private partnerships in terms of renewable energy development. First of all, to undertake a just energy transition, we need to take care of the most affected by climate change. In the Philippines, 6.88% of our population have no access to electricity. For an archipelagic country like the Philippines, we have a total electrification program that requires renewable energy in our microgrid systems. And we also require the use of solar home systems for remote areas and households. Second, all renewable energy developers are required to engage the community before doing any development or planning. Without the consent of the community, a renewable energy project will not proceed. Third, we notice that there are different timelines for different technologies. For example, solar is the easiest to build because the possessory right means that landowners are going to gain funding for their land when the renewable energy developer buys the land. So solar energy projects takes a year and a half to bring to um, energization. The hard ones is the hydroelectric power plant. This is where we get a lot of rejection from communities because hydro power plants can mean use of the water for not for agriculture and not for drinking, but for energy. In those cases, many of our hydroelectric projects take a long time, maybe 5 years to 7 years in gestation. But the most difficult ones is the transmission line. Getting the right of way to bring this renewable energy to the grid takes a lot of effort on our transmission operator. The last point that I would like to make is that in the Philippines, we have a law called ER 1 94, which provides 1 centavo per kilowatt hour that goes to the host community of the renewable energy project to be used for electrification of areas or households with no access to electricity and also for livelihood programs. While this makes it easier for some communities to accept a renewable energy project, it's not always sufficient for some communities to accept this. But at the end of the day, communities are encouraged to learn about the technologies that RE developers are bringing to their communities before making any decision for accepting or rejecting the project. With this in mind, I think that um, acceptance of public of these RE projects is essential and should always be included in making any decisions for RE development. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very clear remarks. On that same topic of community energy, let us hear now from the World Wind Energy Association. Its Secretary General is a strong advocate for community energy and initiated the Community Energy Working Group within the IRENA Coalition for Action. Stefan Gzinger, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be here. And yeah, in my capacity also as indeed chairing this important working group, I believe that we are with renewable energy now at a turning point because it's very, very well known that renewable energy have advantages. They are cost competitive. They are better than nuclear and also fossil fuel resources. So all the information that we have is actually available, but that is obviously not enough. I mean, we are getting a lot of misinformation. We expect it will become worse in the next couple of weeks, days, weeks, months, years to come. And we see already that it has an impact. So I am deeply convinced that we can win that battle fast enough only if we make sure that the actual advantages of renewable energy reach the people. That means that they get, for example, that's a concrete example, lower electricity prices. And I'm very pleased that we've been able to work with IRENA within the Coalition for Action about work out these white papers, which Raul has presented. We know how it works. We know how we can do it. We know how to engage people, how to involve people so that they can benefit from it. Within our group, we have many practitioners. So this is not a kind of academic exercise, but we have people from all over the world, from developing countries. I don't like that word, but from poorer countries, from industrialized countries. We know there are many different ways how it can be done. There is on the one side, of course, this important aspect of information sharing. That is a key in all of this. Of course, we must inform the people, but we must go far beyond that. We know how to make people active participants of renewable energy. That's the nice thing of renewable energy because it's available everywhere. So the question is now, beyond communication, how can we apply those principles that we know, the practical experience that we have, as widely as possible, so that as many people as possible really feel in their pocket. This is not anymore only about climate change, but they really feel in their pocket. That's one example, the advantage, or they just have access to energy if we think of some unserved areas. I was very pleased to hear from several countries that governments are already dealing with that. And we're very happy, of course, to continue this work, provide the information, and provide this, which is usually not discussed on the global level, because those actors usually are not coming to such conferences like we have here. We do have usually local cooperatives, but with this working group and with that work, I'm sure we can offer such stream of information, which is so crucial for the success of what we do, in spite of these information campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the Clean Energy Ministerial also has some illustrative examples to share when it comes to the ability of community inclusion in energy projects to boost public acceptance. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Stick to your instructions and be brief, but also focus on concrete aspects. And I think there are kind of two dimensions of the work we try to encourage in terms of community engagement I want to flag. We try to work on both high-level ministerial support and buy-in for clean energy transitions, as well as gather coalitions that really address the specific aspects. And so on these two dimensions, we try to bring the communities together. Some concrete examples, in 2016, we arranged a intra-governmental level dialogue between federal, provincial, or state governments and local governments to be able to figure out how we can make sure that all stakeholders could agree on long-term plans and work together to achieving it. In 2019, happy to say that Canada hosted a ministerial event and had a very inclusivity-focused ministerial event where all indigenous communities were invited to participate, but also they brought all other sectors of society, organizing a youth energy leaders forum, bringing together youth representatives from 25 different countries, but also all the provinces to make sure that all the community and regional aspects were included. In 2023, when India co-hosted the Clean Energy Ministerial and the G20 Energy Ministerial together, they did that in Goa and brought the local government to also organize and bring their own community to be able to have interactions with the international community, showcasing the lessons learned from both the state and really the local, including those local components into the discussions. Here in Brazil, we also basically bring especially the private sector community, the local domestic private sector stakeholders to be able to participate and link what was being discussed internationally to Brazil's own domestic international aspects. So you can see that at that very high level ministerial level, we try to make sure that the communities are included in those dialogues. Then more specifically, when we look at the work that is being done, over the past 15 years, we've really put a big focus in terms of the socioeconomic aspects of the transition. We have work streams that are dedicated on a few examples. We have an Equality in Energy Transitions initiative that last year published an inclusivity framework that basically looks at 4 key dimensions. One is reflecting, making sure that we consider all inclusivity aspects in terms of the work that we do and that we try to identify ways to maximize socioeconomic benefits. Second, representing, making sure that we bring in these workshops and these work streams representatives from all chances of societies and all regions. Then reinforcing, so basically making sure that in the communications, in the ambitions, we reflect those inclusivity aspects, whether it is through specific targets. For example, we have an Equal by 30 campaign that is looking at equal representation by women in the energy sector by 2030, or by basically showcasing best practices. We also have an ambassadors program that allows good success stories to be repeated. And then finally, wanting to focus on refining. So the whole idea of measuring and coming back. So it's great to have targets, but being able to demonstrate showcase. So that is one concrete example in terms of the work. The other thing is we've launched last year a life campaign, which is looking at how behaviors really are in the driving seat what will make success, and how can we empower local communities to identify the opportunities that they have, but also reflect on how their own priorities and actions can bring forward. And then there, what we do is we have a specific dimension of community engagement that basically looks at having direct involvement for local communities in terms of policy making and basically looking at dedicated communications and awareness for local communities, as well as how to advance communities-based policies, for example, in sustainable transport or in integrated systems planning. And then the last example I say is part of the work that we do on long-term energy planning. We also include in those best practices how to include communities in the development of those plans, but also in the implementation so that they have a local support. And this is something we're actually doing very closely in close cooperation with IRENA through the work we do on long-term energy scenarios. So just examples both at the very high level and the concrete level of how local communities can be brought to support those longer term.
Thank you very much to the Clean Energy Ministerial, and we will come back to inclusive decision-making and participation a little bit later, but I'd like to drill deeper now on benefit sharing as a means of boosting acceptance. And I'll go here to Kenya, which by 2023 aims to provide universal access to power driven 100% by renewables. That's a big ambition. And one driver for that goal is collaboration with IRENA on the Accelerated Partnership for Renewables in Africa, APRA initiative. Geothermal energy is going to be key here. And we want to hear about how good practices in community engagement at geothermal sites are in fact moving that forward.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. My experience is that social licenses are very expensive and a very risky aspect if it's not addressed in any project. It can delay projects, it can disrupt projects, it can also degrade the commercial viability of projects. For a company that works with geothermal in one of the most remote and also volatile region of our country, and for us to be able to succeed, we need to access the right to work with communities and to access land rights. But whenever we have engaged community, they see things a bit different. For the communities in our region, they look at projects as opportunities. So they look at employment, the provisions of water, health services, and others. So the key question is that whenever we then approach the community, then they will be saying, what is it in it for us? But it's not our mandate, but we found ourselves having to buy boats to build classes, provide bursaries for schools, and again, investing in community water, as well as in some situations, having to support the land adjudication processes. So when the community look at a project, they are actually assessing the project by what benefit the project impacts them. So how we have approached this issue, first of all, is the entry point. In our situation is that for all our projects, our entry point is the elected leadership. They act as guardians of the community. They are also like gatekeepers. So they also benefit politically if you involve them from the early stages. They have the potential to promote the project to the community. Alternatively, they can actually incite the community against the project. So every time we go to any of the projects, we begin by getting the elected leadership to a room, we educate them, we inform them, we get their buy-in to these projects. They also, because of their political arrangements, we ride on their ability to mobilize people. So this has been very helpful for us, as much as we also take a caution that they don't own the we avoid being owned by the politicians because they have a short-term interest, whether their period is short, and probably this could change. So as much as we ride on them in the opportunities they provide, we also are very careful that we are not seen to be owned by the politicians. And key areas that we try to empower the politicians is that they need to know the objectives of the project, what the project requires from the community, the timelines, and in particular, they also focus on what are the benefits to the community. That is the first entry point. And in Kenya, again, we also have government agencies on the ground, almost the whole country, and we pride on their presence. They represent government interests within the communities because I work for government, and they promote those projects. So getting them involved as early as possible, then you actually access the benefit of the fact that they have been working with communities for different projects. And that then becomes very, very helpful for us. So, and again, they also act as advisors. They understand who are the troublemakers, and they know those people whom they will hold your hand, you get your projects completed. Because they are already financed by government, then the only issue you need, or the only investment you need to do, is to facilitate their activities to support the project. As a matter of policy, we ensure that at all times we have direct representation of the community. We support the community to get committees in place that work with us directly. We facilitate those communities, and then we engage the leaders regularly. We actually have structured way of ensuring that once the communities are in place, that we have meetings with them, let's say every once a quarter, for almost the entire period of the project, especially during construction. The advantage with this is that these people will always give you feedback. If there are problems, there will be the people who will actually be able to tell you in advance that probably please check on these issues. What we have also seen is that when you engage the community directly, what happens is that they start owning the project. The other area that we have also done ourselves is having what we call dedicated personnel on the projects. And in particular, we actually get some of these people from the communities themselves, and that way then they actually articulate the interests of the project to their people. We have been investing also in media, and the key focus areas, as I complete, one of them is get understood by the community at all times, regular engage the communities for feedback, manage expectations because the community should expect a lot, invest in conflict resolution, and then develop personalized relationship with key stakeholders, empower the communities to understand the issues around your project, build trust, and where possible, design community stakes into them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that detailed look at how Kenya is approaching this. Before I go on, let me just ask all remaining speakers to please try to stay within our 3-minute limit because we are running over time already. We're going to go over time no matter what, but I'd like to try to keep the overtime manageable. So now I continue with the German Development Agency, the GIZ, and it will share some successful examples on transitioning fossil fuel dependent communities in partner countries.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Moderator, and thanks to Irene for hosting this session and inviting us. We spoke a lot about access of communities to renewables and the profits, and what is the other side of the coin is of course also talking and involving the communities that feel themselves on the loser side of the energy transition by losing proper paid jobs in mining or in fossil fuel power production. And that is one aspect that we are strongly touching out of support from the German Ministry of Economy and Climate in our what we call EKI transition project. And there we commit to steer these kind of community dialogues in Indonesia, in also Thailand, South Africa, in affected communities that are affected by phasing out from fossil fuels. And the topics actually, and then this is also why Germany is strongly engaged in this, are very similar to what we see in, for instance, German coal regions in the east and west, where we have to phase out of lignite especially. And that these dialogues first, they circle around one question that I think is a little under represented in all discussions. It is about finding, and we call it mini industrial strategies for these regions and communities. Where will they gain their future income from? And this is, as we see in Germany, but as we also see in these partner countries, not easy, because when we see the whole transition, not only the let's say the energy transition, whole green transition, is that the new jobs are actually not created where the old are lost. And there we need a lot to talk. What is also GIZ, and based on our usually instruments, what we do is increasing the capacities of the communities actually to do these dialogues, also to do their own strategies, but also do a lot of trainings in the direction of new job potentials. And that is also very necessary. And yeah, keeping it short, I think whenever we talk about community involvement, it needs the both sides that we discussed here first, that the kind of the winning side, but also not forgetting, and I call it really perceived losers, because this is also something that is strongly connected to perceptions, but these are perceptions, as we see globally, that turn into at least that seen in this community, and political votes that are not very favorable to all our goals, and therefore strongly highlight not to forget this and keep this discussion on this side also. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. And we go now to Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. My name is Primrose Ray. I'm here as the Arena Youth Delegate coming from Zimbabwe, and also an energy engineer and climate change specialist working for an NGO in Zimbabwe. So in Zimbabwe, on our NGO, it is on locally led indigenous nature-based solutions. We realize that most of the times people, when they implement the projects, they overlook the role of indigenous communities and locally led solutions when implementing them. In this age, there are still some NGOs who call the project participants as beneficiaries. If we remain to call our project participants as beneficiaries, it means that we are coming in as the donor and you are just benefiting from us. And with that mindset, you realize that people end up not respecting those beneficiaries in courts, their rights, their culture, their land, their values, because we are the ones bringing the money. So we realized that in our project in Zimbabwe, and we corrected that our project participants are not just stakeholders, we call them the leaders. That way we are able to respect their values, and that way we are sure that we can achieve both the tripling of renewable energy capacity and also energy justice. We need to achieve that, both of them. So drawing now from my experience in the current project which we are working in Zimbabwe, we ensure that every step we include our project participants. So to ensure that we formed quite a number of committees. We engage our project, we engage the communities during the baseline survey to make sure that we don't just bring a project. We are now putting a solar at this school. We have not engaged them before. And also during the project proposal and budgeting of a project, We ensure that the community is also involved in that. During the environmental impact assessment, we ask them, is it safe for us to put a solar system at this place? Because you may end up putting a solar system at a place which is a sacred place for the people, and we are not respecting the indigenous and cultural values of those people. We also, to ensure the sustainability of projects, um, if communities are included, projects become sustainable, inclusive, and equitable, to ensure that we work with various community groups, such as the Women Coalition or Climate Change Network, for implementing the renewable energy projects, the Men Can Cook Gender Forum, the Gender Champions, the School Climate Change Clubs. We also have some lead farmers who are the leaders for implementation of projects, the Boys Forum, and so on. And also, along the implementation of the projects, ensure that we do some policy consultations from time to time to ensure that we are moving together with the leaders who are going to benefit from this project. Awareness raising and trainings. And lastly, promote local jobs. When you come with a project in a community, to ensure any justice, don't procure some of the stuffs out of the country or in the neighboring districts. We ensure that all the local resources that are in that place which we're implementing with the project, we promote jobs for them. For example, clean cook stores. Instead of getting the clean cook stores from Zambia or another district, there are local artisans who are there in the community. We procure from them the solar, if it's trees or biogas, if there's a biogas artisan or mason around in the community, we promote local jobs so that our projects ensure that we both have the justice and also increase the renewable energy capacity. So to conclude, I would say that, like the Deputy Director General said, the success of projects is not just about renewables. We are bringing a renewable energy project, but it's about the people. Let's empower the people. Let's respect the people, and also let's partner as much as we can with other stakeholders which are involved in the project, and also be open for feedback. What is the community thinking about the project which you are implementing? So to ensure that we have feedback, we have various feedback mechanisms which the communities can give us the feedback from time to time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Primrose, for being with us. We'll hear next from Solar Power Europe, which will share some of the ways that it's working to foster community benefit in solar development.
Yes, thank you, everyone. My name is Mante Hayes from Solar Power Europe, which is the European Solar Industry Association. I'm also vice chair of the Global Solar Council. Thank you for this opportunity, and congrats to Win for the organization of this event. So, solar energy really has a special role to play when it comes to empowering communities. And why is that? It's because the versatile nature of solar energy, it really comes in big and small and also medium. And so solar is really one of the only renewable energy sources that is so dominated by small scale and distributed projects. And so therefore solar can really support local communities. And it is also thanks to solar that local communities can be more likely to support the energy transition. And I briefly want to mention 7 ways how and why this can happen. So first, economic growth and job creation. So solar is really a very job intensive sector, especially the small scale part, the distributed part, and especially when it comes to the construction and operation and maintenance segment. In the European Union, as of 2023, there were 830,000 jobs sustained by solar. And if correct, the right policies, market policies are implemented by policymakers, this number can increase to 1 million by 2027. Second, energy independence and reducing energy bills. So households can become more energy independent from importing, from buying energy from the grid, just like nations can become more energy independent from importing fossil fuels from abroad. And households can also reduce their energy bills thanks to solar. Third, community investment. For example, many solar projects include investments in local infrastructure projects and educational programs. And we as SolarPerp, we're encouraging project developers to invest more. Fourth, educational opportunities. So solar projects are opportunities for local schools, local universities to educate students. Fifth, social cohesion. Involving communities like in solar projects can really foster a sense of community. Sixth, support for local policies. So studies have really shown that households and people who have solar panels on their rooftops are much more likely to support the energy transition and to support policies aimed at the energy transition. In seventh, we at the solar sector, we have an initiative called the Solar Stewardship Initiative. It's a very robust sustainability assurance program that enshrines principles like human rights, labor rights, the FPIC, the free, prior, and informed consent, labor rights, and it developed an ESG standard that solar companies are adhering to. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very clear list. Nowhere is the NIMBY phenomenon of public rejection more pronounced than when it comes to infrastructure and grid build out, which is why we are especially pleased to hear now from the Renewables Grid Initiative on how to increase local support by providing appropriate benefits to communities that host grid infrastructure. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I would like to start by saying that the report is really well written. A lot of content is in there. So if you're not read it, do it. It's well. Grid projects are very different from solar and wind projects or other renewable projects. They can extend hundreds of kilometers, meaning they can cross sometimes hundreds of small communities and affect thousands of individuals. Means that while the principles that are highlighted in the report still stands, the infrastructure that you need to deal with community engagement, discovering what local benefits may be, is very different. Moreover, grids are generally regulated assets, meaning that they have regulated budgets. So now if we come to discuss how do we make sure that community benefit, I call them local benefits, are generated in grid projects, you need to think, how do you make sure that the energy regulators allow and actually promote the allocation of budgets for this local benefit to be created? Because otherwise, this will not happen. One additional point is that what is a local benefit is a local decision. We cannot decide what we are going to do. So energy regulators, because they are the ones that at the end decide about grids, also need to give the flexibility to the project promoters and the project developers to engage with the community much broadly beyond this narrow, energy discussion, because a local benefit, as the speaker from Kenya was saying, could be something completely different. Could be about repairing water pipes or developing veggie gardens, you name it. So usually this is not done, and this requires a cultural change inside organization, industry organization, but also, and most of all, inside the institution and regulatory authorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A big emphasis there on flexibility and thinking outside the box. Clearly very crucial here. We'd like to come back now to the topic of public engagement and awareness. It's been mentioned several times, but let's now take a deeper dive. And for that purpose, we will go first to China, which aims to significantly boost the country's renewable energy consumption with a new plan that does emphasize public engagement and highlights the importance of educating and involving citizens in order to foster a broad cultural shift toward sustainability. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yes, China, I would like to share two perspective of gain support from community, including you mentioned the public education. From the perspective of local employment, we see that the energy transition can promote new economic growth and create job opportunities. But however, it also forces impact on the existing production and employment. So therefore, we must ensure the connection between the new and old jobs, create decent jobs for those affected in the fossil fuel industry. So that so we build the wind and solar bases in the post-coal mining areas. So to create new job opportunity for miners, then we get the support for the mining community. And from the perspective of local residents in wind and solar new energy bases, in recent years, China took energy transition as an important part of poverty evaluation or rural revitalization to enhance community participation and the sense of gains. So in this regard, we have again we take two main approach, and one we develop distributed renewable energies. So to help the household, like the public fund to help the household to build the distributed new energy. Now the scale of household PV in rural areas has reached 120 gigawatt, involve more than 5.5 million households. It can increase the income by 11 billion yuan annually and create about 2 million jobs, greatly enhance the income and the livelihood for local residents. Another approach will also promote the PV plus agriculture or fictional or pastoral. I would like to share one concrete example. There is a village called Tana in the northwest Zhejiang province, China. And that's a case of the pastoral PV park turned the desert to oasis. It's a place where grass doesn't grow and the wind blows all year round. However, with the construction of the world's largest PV park here, the former no man's wasteland has been transformed in a lush of pasture. We approach this. We build a very higher PV panel. The PV panel uses a panel that fixed in a higher rest and leaving enough vertical space for the shipping. And more than 10,000 of Tibetan ship was raised in the PV ocean, made the innumerable PV panels, which can not only provide the shadow, block the wind, but also giving the water to the soil during we clean the PV panel and promote plant growth in the pot and gradually transform the barren land into a oasis. So that's like a model of power generation on the panel and a sheep between the panels and grass growing under the panels. And this innovative model has truly achieved a good interaction that benefits different parties, such as the ecology, the PV park investor, and the local herdsman. So that case is very popular that in China now, the public are aware that the development of renewable energy not only like generating electricity, but also improves the ecological system and also improves the livelihood of the local people. So people are more willing to harvest the development of new renewable energy. That's all. How the public generally support the development of renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very interesting example, and also for your first point, which corresponds to what we heard earlier from Germany's GIZ, namely that when we are thinking about community participation, we need to think about not only the communities involved in what we're transitioning to, but also what we're transitioning from. So very, very helpful there. Let's go now to the Global Wind Energy Council, GWEC, which is going to share what the industry is doing to address misinformation and disinformation.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very good to be here, and thank you for the report and the hard work from the IRENA team on this, which is much appreciated. I'll be very brief. So really excellent contributions. Communities are obviously not one size fits all. There's many, many different types of communities, from urban coastal communities in industrialized countries to remote rural communities and indigenous communities in the developing world and so on. For us, as the wind industry, it's really mission critical to do this community engagement right, given that we are so heavily dependent on approval and planning and public acceptance. And then if you look at the fact that we need to triple wind energy capacity by 2030, our spatial expansion, and therefore the amount of contact we have with different communities and stakeholders and people around the world increases exponentially. And I think there's two aspects here. One is what the industry needs to do, and I think excellent points have been made around what the industry can do, and that's early engagement, community ownership models, consultation, listening, and everything that is in our realm. But it's also about regulation and making sure that governments mandate, as the minister from Belgium said, that we need clear mandates and policy from governments. Most of the conflict that we've seen in the last 20 years in the wind industry has been where the rules are not clear and where there are differing standards of engagement in different projects, and that creates conflict and the sense of injustice and unfairness, and that's when things go wrong. So the clearer guidelines in terms of best practices and in terms of regulation and legislation are really important, as are industry best practices as well, to make sure we're doing things in the best possible way. I'll touch very briefly on disinformation. 3 years ago, whale deaths were reported across the eastern coast of the US because of offshore wind development. In fact, there was no offshore wind construction going on at all at that time, and the US government came out and said, guys, there's nothing going on here. But that didn't stop the disinformation from spreading, and all kinds of concerns around this issue. This was created by AI and AI images, which are very easy to copy and paste. And then we saw a proliferation of those images from the US to Australia, back to Europe, and to places like Brazil, where again nothing is going on and nothing's even started yet, and so on. So the issue here is how it impacts communities' understanding of what's going to happen, the creating of fear and irrational concerns, and the use of kind of green on green issues to suggest that somehow the solution and the benefits are outweighed by the damage that projects will do. And of course, this then plays into the planning system and creates fatal, at least for the transition, potentially delays in being able to go and do things. So just very quickly, what are we doing about it? GWEC started working on this about 3-4 years ago, and recognizes as this being a problem. We convened stakeholders to a big retreat in Wilton Park with the UK Foreign Office last year, and brought people from all over the world to discuss the problem. We are now working on a disinformation war room, which has a unique software system and information gathering system, which we will fully launch at COP30 in Brazil. And the Brazilian government is one of the governments that's been working very, very hard on this whole question of disinformation. And I can't talk more because my 3 minutes are up, but I'd invite anyone in this room who's interested in taking part in that work, please come and talk to me about it. So thank you.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the timekeeping mention. We are now really getting into overtime, so please, everybody, keep your statements as short as you can. Another point on importance of awareness, accurate information, and citizen involvement comes from the European Renewable Energies Federation, EREF. Please.
For this great event here and with for the good discussion. The European Renewable Energies Federation is a federation of renewable energy national associations from all over the EU. And we are addressing all renewables technologies, so from wind, solar, geothermal, etc., sectors. Being said, I have only 2 minutes, so I have 2 points. One is reiterating on the fact that the best way to really involve people to really create support. I don't like the word acceptance because this sounds so much like suffering. To create people's support for renewable energy installations can be making them see immediate benefits. Benefits can be financial benefits, the most direct ones by ownership in a cooperative way or as a participant in a project. It can also be by seeing community benefits, for instance, taxes, fees, payments. Is that low electricity prices produced from renewables must reach the consumers. So they must see it on their electricity bill, and it should not be hidden behind market designs where new fossil prices dictate. The second and even more important thing is awareness, knowledge about what is actually happening. And I think the best way to explain what I mean by this is fighting disinformation is important, debunking myths is important. The best way is a reality check, fact check as it is sometimes called. And so I get you one short example from my home country, Germany, where our association, together with some stakeholders, is regularly doing a public survey on how much do you like or dislike renewable energy installations. And the recent one is from November last year. And like always, they were asking people, do you like or do you dislike renewable energy installations? The general number was 57% of all people said yes, we are in favor of renewable energy installations. And even 86% of those who actually had them in their neighborhood were in favor. So much more people who have seen what we are talking about have them in their favor. The most favorized one is always solar, where 70% of everybody, but even 82% of those who have it or who have it in their neighborhood like it. It's a little bit more tricky with wind energy, where the recent poll says 42%, only 42% of everybody likes it. But those who have it in their neighborhood is 20% more. More than 60% of those who actually know what a wind turbine is and who know that the noise which people are talking about is not real, they really like it and they support it and they want it more. There's a similar thing with geothermal. Only 50% like it, but those who have it in their neighborhood goes up to 69%. Another one with biogas. People think it stinks. Sometimes it really does, but still only a third of all questioned like it, but those who have it in their neighborhood, it's nearly 60%. So my point, and I think this is where I stop.
Thank you.
If you know what you're talking about, you're in favor of it, and renewables normally are the positive part.
Thank you very much. I promised you at the beginning we'd have a few success stories. Here comes one of them for sure. Uruguay is a great model because the country's power sector is based on 98% renewable energy already. And it's gotten there in part through a very strong narrative that portrays renewable energy as the most affordable option to achieve energy security. So let's hear more now from Uruguay.
Good afternoon. First of all, I ask you to excuse my English is terrible, so I will share some notes that I wrote. I would like to extend my warm greeting and sincere thanks to Irina for inviting me to this roundtable. I am going to start share with you background information of Uruguay's experience. At the beginning of the century, Uruguay set out to the expand of the renewable energy source to decarbonize its electricity matrix and reduce dependence on import fossil fuels. In just 10 years, Uruguay practically doubled the generation capacity by installing renewable technologies. As a result of this inclusion, it is possible to ensure a participation of more than 19% of domestic renewable source on the electricity matrix, 99% in 2024. We plan to incorporate 100 megawatts of solar energy per year. The energy policy implemented in the country has also become an important environment policy. It has enabled a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emission by minimizing the use of fossil fuels in electricity matrix. It's also contributed to reduce in the cost of generation and reduce the vulnerability of the energy generation sector to extreme weather events. But for energy transition to be just for everyone, it's important to guarantee the access of energy. In Uruguay's case, we have achieved a 99.9% of the urban and rural electrification rate. Today, we are in the process of what we call the second step in the energy transition, with the objective of continuing to decarbonize the energy sector. In this framework, Uruguay is directed as offered toward the hydrogen economy, electromobility, and energy efficiency. In this regard, we have carried out several activities that arrive at communication, strategic, and information citizens about this new technology, such as forums, webinars in which the academia and private sector have also been involved. Finally, another important point I will like to mention regarding our pathing thought decarbonization and the social and political support this path has received, provide stability and establish in a true state policy. Nothing would have been possible without the values we stand for a nation, a full democracy system, strong political institution with strong interconnection, social and legal stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I still have 4 interventions. If you can keep them to 2 minutes, that means that all the women in the room will still be able to make it to the Women in Diplomacy dinner that starts very soon. So I go now to REN 21, the Multi-Stakeholder Governance Group, and Rana, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. So I think just to highlight the tension point we have here, there's a climate urgency. And what we are discussing about are things that very often take time. And what we are trying to find as common ground of understanding is we need to have a fair and an equitable, but also a rapid transition, because otherwise, basically, this is going to delay our development of renewable energy. And I think with regard to this, there is different context. It's amazing to hear all these great stories, which are often known at the local level. But I think collectively, we need to bring them together and contribute to the disinformation, but also the positive information campaign, because we know that fake news spreads 6 times quicker than the reality. So I think this is a collective part of let's bring those things together, group them, and have a massive global communication campaign about those good things. Another part, most of the citizens don't care about what energy they are using. They want to switch on the light and have energy supply. They will care about their electricity bill, for instance. And they will care about, we spoke about all those socioeconomic benefits, but the reality also is that very often we do not have solid information about the socioeconomic benefits in terms of data. So I think this is another part which is really important, is let's invest collectively in what are the socioeconomic benefits that are happening so that we can really better tell the story of what it brings. And I would like to end on one positive part, because I do think what we're discussing about is also fully changing the energy governance. And that's for, I think, a very encouraging number. Household investment
in energy has actually moved from 9% in 2015 to 18% in 2023. And this is linked to the fact of investment in rooftop solar in particular, in heat pumps, but also the fact that in some countries, like we had the discussion yesterday on Pakistan, we just had the discussion with Lebanon, we see in some African countries, household businesses, etc., are directly investing in their own generation because it's cheaper to do so, or they can actually not get 24/7 supply with fossil fuel. And I just think these are arguments we need to develop differently and learn how to speak about energy without speaking about energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We go now to the Climate Action Network, which wants to talk about inclusive and participatory decision-making. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful experiences and stories shared. I'm representing Climate Action Network International, an umbrella organization comprising about 2,000 civil society organization members in more than 130 countries, which represent about 90% of global population. Much has been said. I wanted to say I'd stop not talking about this one because it was all nice about the accountability, acceptance, further involvement by community activities. But let me, at this point in time, also dilute the wine a little bit. We have, as I said, 2,000 members in 130 countries. We have many members who work on the ground on consultative processes, on stakeholder consultation, regional, local, but also international. What we have seen, and we have also many human rights organizations in CAN, what we have seen in the last 10 years is a very rapid shrinking of civil space. Last year was a record year. A reflection probably of the conflicts we are living in, but not only that one. There's a fragmentation in consultative processes. Overall, many things go well, but other things go worse or do not happen anymore, unfortunately. Just to give you a summary here, what I took from the Amnesty International yearbook, last year, 2023, there were about 200 journalists, local journalists working on social movements, environmental issues, and environmental defenders and activists in almost all parts of the world killed. More than 800 people, activists, local activists in particular, which were not on the limelight of the media, have been imprisoned without any reason, in many cases tortured or even raped. This number is growing in many countries, unfortunately. I think we need to keep that in mind when we talk about consultative processes that with these governments, we have problems to work. Now I come to positive, so you allow me. We have been working
briefly, if you would, please.
Briefly. The first process which we really like to work on, it's not perfect, is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the authoritative body on climate. With a very large consultative process with governments, with stakeholders, civil society, business, and finance alike. A very tedious process, which comes out with a consensus conclusion in the end, which we might not like everything, but the process in principle is sound. We had as CAN International with the IPCC for the Working Group on Energy and Mitigation 10 webinars with many CSOs, with many authors. The IPCC also did this with finance and industry before the report was written. Everything was under draft conditions, and they took many things on board, not everything. The second process I like to mention is being a European, having worked for CSOs many years on legislation. I think that the European process on providing legislative drafts and providing laws is, again, not perfect, but might be an example to some extent for other countries to take. The European Commission, one of the three bodies in Europe, is drafting legislation. They do this based on a consultative basis where every citizen, every organization in Europe, but also outside of Europe, is invited to give input. In tendency, that would be 360 million people in Europe, and also people from outside can give input, because many issues which are legislated in Europe have an impact in particular also in developing countries, trade issues, for instance, but also energy issues. And only then the legislation is drafted, but in the process with the Commission and the European Parliament and the European Council, the ministers, there are lots of workshops happening in the European Parliament and elsewhere where further input, in particular from CSOs and other stakeholders, are invited. I'm not saying it's perfect, but one of the reasons why Europe has, I think, one of the most progressive climate and renewable energy legislation in the world is the result of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We go now to the Community Energy Toolkit, COMET. The founder and managing director, Ayu Abdullah, will focus on energy access initiatives with community and gender focus across Asia and Africa. Floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think we'd just like to offer some insights and learnings from our work. So COMET, or the Community Energy Toolkit, is a community engagement software tool that uses mini-grid simulations and scenarios in community workshops, where communities get to interact and experience what a mini-grid is like, and where they build an understanding of their priorities, their load profiles, and basically understand the value of electricity to them. What this does is basically it aligns expectations between communities and external entities, whoever's developing the systems with them. So I cut my address short. So I hope some of you would come and come and approach me if this is of interest. Because it's a digital tool, it can be adapted to different local contexts and scenarios, and we get real data from this digital tool. We've used it in over 100 communities worldwide, from East Africa to Southeast Asia to the Pacific Islands. We've used it in many different use cases and contexts. In communities in Malaysia, where we're headquartered, we've used it to design tariffs, to design governance structures of mini-grids, community-based systems. We've also used it in Indonesia, where we increase usage of mini-grid systems, and also that means an increased usage of demand and also revenue projections to make the system more sustainable. And most recently, we've used it in large-scale feasibility studies for energy planning in Fiji. So really, it's a very adaptive, flexible tool that can be used from small-scale kind of projects to large-scale projects as well. So we go beyond just the numbers. And because it's context specific, you can really get a lot of nuanced information. And I think my last thing to say here is that I would love to see more innovation in this space, where we all agree that community engagement is extremely important, but we need to put real investment and support to innovating new ways to approach communities that go beyond surveys, questionnaires, focus group discussions, which are very difficult to do in practice, and making sure that you get meaningful and substantive information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aya, and I'll encourage everybody to get in touch with Aya Abdullah if you would like to hear more about that very interesting toolkit, indeed, also as a way of spreading best practices. So many thanks to you. And our final comment comes from the Stockholm Environment Institute. You will talk about strategies to advance social acceptance of renewables. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Stockholm Environment Institute, which is a global think tank. We have 7 centers around the world and do work at the Latin America Center. So I'm willing to share some strategies and research we've done on social acceptance of wind energy in Colombia, particularly in a region in the north of Colombia called La Guajira, which is very relevant for wind energy in Colombia. It has about 45 wind parks in the pipeline and just 2 built and operating, and they collectively sum up around 30 megawatts, so they are very small. There's high poverty in this region as well. All these parks are located in a region in indigenous people, so they have to do free pre-informed consent. But there is high potential for conflictivity here. Many wind parks have been suspended the construction, and others have just cancelled the so in this context, we have extensively researched what does it mean social acceptance of wind energy in this region, and we found out that 3 concrete strategies do work for advance the problems we've seen. The first one is building local capacities, and that means making sure communities are able to understand the impacts of wind energy, so that it helps also addressing misconceptions, but making sure also that communities are aware of benefits. What are the benefits and what can they do with that? We spoke to many of them, and some of them were telling, what usually happens with benefits is companies take us, for instance, as like an example, they take us to a shop, and well, you can take whatever you want, and we take the candies because it's the things we do know, right? It's a metaphor of what happens in the territory. So if they don't know what they can ask and what they can do, what happens is they do anything. The other thing I wanted to highlight is peer-to-peer exchanges, which was highlighted by Barbados already. And we do try that as well in La Guajira, and it went really well. We took some communities, some community members from regions that were being consulted to be built a wind turbine, and we took them to a place where a wind turbine was already built in this same region. So they get the chance to talk to the locals on the impacts, on the benefits, how did they dealt with the consultation, what sort of benefit scheme they did implement, and so on. We were there facilitating, but the conversation was happening within them. And afterwards, the conclusion was from many of them, they were saying, I have been consulted for a wind turbine in my territory, and I have many preconceptions. Now that I've seen it, it's not too bad after all. Now that I've been talking with locals, it's not too bad. So it can be done in a better way. So that was really relevant. And the third one, to be brief, is showcasing best practices, because we are getting used to hear that things go bad, that this doesn't work. But what works then? I mean, how can we highlight there are things that do work in the regions? And just to finish, one key learning in our process is many communities just don't care or see it as irrelevant, the climate narrative of renewables. They just don't care. It's irrelevant for them to achieve 1.5 degrees or the Paris Agreement and all these discussions, which I'm not saying is not relevant, but for them, it's even more relevant to know what does this mean for local development. How do projects translate into local development or tangible benefits? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that does bring our session to a close. And I'm very sorry, many of you had your nameplates up. I know you wanted to contribute. I wish we had had time for that. Unfortunately, we started late and we ran over time drastically. So I apologize to all of those who didn't get a chance to speak. I'd also like to thank all of those who did speak for your very valuable comments that covered so many different aspects of how we build public support. And I think for me, one sentence, just to sum up as briefly as I can, this is not a technology transition. This is a socioeconomic transformation. And if we want it to happen faster, we have to keep that in mind. And Director Pellico talked about 2 aspects, procedural justice and distributional justice. And you have given us so many different examples of both. I will not even begin to reiterate those. I will simply say you provided us a wealth of things to think about moving forward. So that's it for me. Many, many thanks to all of you, also to those who so patiently gave us their attention throughout this very intensive and complex session. I'd also like to thank the organizing team for a fantastic job putting this together. And with that, I close the session and I wish everybody a great, just one thing. Let's thank Ms. Oliphant for her hard work taking notes. She is going to be reporting the results of this dialogue so that we have it in the record for the next session. So many thanks to you as well. And have a great evening. Enjoy the rest of the official assembly when it begins tomorrow. Goodbye.